Okay, welcome to part 2 of this lab. We're looking at the Investigate Kali Linux lab. So in part 2, we're going to be looking at, we've talked about the man command, the man password command. The man command, what it does is that it gives you a manual of a particular command. And we said also that when you do the man command or man password command, like when you say man pwd or man, you want to check a manual of the manual. You want to check the manual of a particular command. Once you're done, you could just do a queue and it's going to quit. So you have quite a lot of commands in Linux. You want to familiarize yourself with quite a lot of them. So we have move, we have change mode, we have twan, we have dd, pwd. Let's look at quite a few of them. So let's assume we just want to say, okay, first thing first, let's assume we want to let's have something like, okay, if we want to create a directory, so the command is make dir, right? And when you say make dir, so you see a list of all of these commands. So you could check out these commands and try to learn how to use them. Things like ifconfig. In Windows, we normally say ipconfig, apt-get if you need to install, you want to configure, you want to remove packages, that's like softwares on your Linux machine. So let me just say make directory, then you're going to tell the directory you want to make. Let's say, but first, it's important for you to be able to cd into a particular directory. For instance, let me clear, that was the command. For instance, before you start creating files and all of that, because you're not in a GUI environment, you want to just say pwd. You want to check your current present working directory. Then you can also do an ls. And ls is going to state all of the folders inside that present working directory. So I can go to, let's say, desktop, right? I could go to desktop. I would just say cd desktop, right? So now understand that this is case sensitive. So can I just say desktop? The right text is desktop. So I'll say cd desktop. Right? So it's going to get me into this particular directories, like I'm moving, changing my directories. If I say ls, it's going to show me, get me show me get me into that particular directory. Now, while I'm in this directory, I could not do the command. I want to make dir. I want to make directory. Let's say I want to make a directory and call it Cisco course, or let me say ethical underscore hacker, right? So if I say ethical underscore hacker, I've created a directory. If I minimize this, right? If I minimize this, close this up, I check my desktop, right? You're going to see that that particular folder is there. So I could come here back and say, okay, I want to now maybe create a file, or I've created a directory. Let me now cd into the folder, right? I have now changed my directory into that particular folder, right? So once I've done that, I can now use the touch command. The touch command is a command you could use to like create files. So when you say touch, after you've navigated into the directory, you can now create the file using the touch file. And when you say you do use touch, typically you're going to create an empty file. So I could just say touch and now say, let's say tutorial, right? Let's say txt. I just want to create a file called tutorial.txt. Once I enter, what will happen is that it would have created that particular file. If you still navigate to that folder, no, this is my desktop, this is the folder I created, this is the file. Now you see the difference between trying to create some of these things in a GUI environment and in a CLI environment. So it's very important that when you're trying to learn the Linux environment, you typically learn how to do this in a CLI environment. So once I'm done with that, one thing I want to do is I will always just like to clear my screen, right? So I can have very clean slate because my Windows area is a little bit small. Now, I'm in the ethical hacker directory inside my desktop. I can say ls. So what is ls? You want to list the files in the directory. So it's going to list those files. So what else can you do? You can try to copy a file to another location within the same directory or another. So you could use the copy command. Okay, let's try to create, let's say, another directory. So let's cd back, right? So when you say cd dot dot, what you're trying to do, rather cd space dot dot, right? So when you say cd dot dot, you're trying to go one step backwards. If I say ls, I'm going to be having that particular folder. So let me make another directory and say, let's say CCNA. So this is CCNA. So if I say ls on this desktop, I'm going to see two files. I'm going to see the CCNA folder and the ethical folder. I can change directory into the ethical hacker folder, right? And one thing I can do is that for that particular file I created, that's the tutorial.txt, I can try to move the file. So let me try to use, let me try to use the copy command and say tutorial.txt. I can now call it, let's say copy of underscore tutorial.txt. Right? So you see, I've successfully copied this particular file. Now, you could make directory, like I said, you could move also files into different directories. Now, you can also list files in different and several other directories. What about if I want to remove a particular file? I want to remove, let me create another file. I can say touch check.txt. So I've created a new file. If I say ls, I'm going to see that I have two files, rather three files. The first file I created, the duplicate or the copy of the second file, then the last file I just created using touch. What about if I want to remove this first file that I created? So all I just need to do is to say rm, and I say tutorial.txt. Once I do that and do ls, I would have listed just that the files in that directory. And you see that this particular file is gone. I'm left to just this file and this file. And of course, that's what you have here. So you could also change permissions. Now, I will do a separate videos about permissions. Now, what we're trying to do is just to explore the different environments. So Linux have what we call the 3-number permission types, where you have either 777, 55, 754, all of those. So we'll do a separate video on permissions. But you can actually change permissions to tell who should be able to see the file, who should be able to use the file, and all of that. One other thing you could do is also to try to see the content of a file. So the command to use is cat. So you say cat check.txt. So if you say cat check.txt, you see that it's empty. Another command you can use is to say something like, I think nano check.txt. Nano is actually typically going to open the file so that you can now say, okay, we are learning how to use the Kali Linux. Wow, what is that? Kali Linux environment so that we can be very comfortable in using the OS. So this is going to be our first step in becoming pros. There are so many advantages of learning how to move around especially in the CLI interface. Okay, so I'm done with that. I could do file, I could quit, I could close tab, I could open a new window, or I could go to a particular line. I could copy and paste something inside of this place. I could view. So this is like what you could use to like create a file. So what I like to do is just to do a Control X, and that we try to save this particular file, and I just enter Y, and it's going to save it, right? So if I do a Control X, it's going to try to save the file, which I've done. Now I could also do a Control C, or rather Control, yes, X is going to save it. Then I could do a Control Q, or I think just Q, sorry. Save, and save, and I hit enter, and it's going to go off that particular environment. So if I say cat check.txt, now you're going to see that it's going to list the content inside of that file. The first time we said cat check.txt, it was empty. The second time we're trying to do that, we find out that there is content in it. If I say cat copy of tutorial, sorry, so I could say cat, right, copy selection. Now, there's one thing you can do also. If you want your, let me just delete all of these and just give a space, yes, cat space, and just paste that command. If you want, okay, since everything didn't copy, let me copy this way, copy selection, and come here, cat, and paste my selection. Okay, just paste clipboard, right? So if you want your keyboard shortcuts like control, some of the keyboard shortcuts to work, you might need to do some configuration in the Oracle VirtualBox settings. We can look at that later on. So once I say cat, you see that the file is empty, nothing's going to show. But if I say something like nano and say, or let me just go back to the previous command, we looked at that earlier on. So by just using the up arrow and say nano, and I say this is testing the new file, and I control S save, and I say control X, it's going to exit. And when I say cat that file, and I hit enter, is going to tell me what the content is. So these and many more are some kind of commands that you want to familiarize yourself with. I can clear. I could do something like ifconfig. So ifconfig is going to give me the list of the files, the adapters on my machine. Right, quite a lot of them. If I was in a Windows environment, I could do something like let me see, command prompts, please. I'm not working on the Node.js project. Let me just say CMD. Just a second. So if you're on a Linux machine, so you use ifconfig. So this is what you have. So you have this particular adapter. You have another adapter. So an adapter is actually a means for you to make a network connection. So every device is going to have an adapter it will use to connect either a LAN adapter or a Wi-Fi adapter or whatever kind of adapter. So if you're new to networking, it's at this point that you need to have some background in networking. You can check my channel on the playlist. I have, I think, 1 or 2 networking courses. You have the CCNA 1, the CCNA 2. If you intend to also get your CCNA certification, you can reach out to us and we'll hook you up with Cisco Network Academy, and you can also go through that process. Now, so for those of us that are a little bit comfortable with networks, you understand that a network is a PC is going to have some adapters. If I was in a Windows environment, I can just do a CMD I will typically run ipconfig. If I say ipconfig, it's going to show me the different adapters I have on this system. There's the first one, there's the second one, then this is my Wi-Fi card, right? So this one, I think is not in connection. It's not connected. This isn't connected. So I'm actually connected through my Wi-Fi. That's why I have an IP address. I have a default gateway. So on a Linux environment, if you want to check that, you use the ifconfig. So let me clear this. If you also want to see the running processes that are running on your Linux machine, you can say, you can run this and it's going to tell you all of the things that is happening on your Linux box. So all the connections that are happening